Hello, hello, hello. Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of Bent Pages and Bending Bodies. I'm your hostess, Dr. Hannah P. And before we get into today's PT episode, first of all, I want to say that you can follow, like, subscribe to this page on Instagram at BPBB Podcast, like Bent Pages, Bending Bodies Podcast. Yep, you got it. BPBB Podcast. You can also like, subscribe, follow this page on YouTube where this video will be available if you want to see my face. um, this episode will also be available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So yeah, go ahead and get those notifications. And guys, help your girl out. Go ahead and share this video with your people, with your friends, with your family, hey, with your coworkers, anybody who you think might get a good laugh or wants to learn something new about the world of healthcare. Or the other part of this podcast, which are the book reviews. Yeah, go ahead and just help your girl out, send it to people so we can get the word out about bent pages, bending bodies. Appreciate it. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. Well, like I said, it's a physical therapy episode. So if you remember in the last PT episode, we talked about the application process, right? So kind of walked you through the whole thing. We started with the PTCast website, how I chose my school, just like the list of schools that I made. Yeah, just that whole, if you haven't listened to it, just go back and check it out because it was really detailed and I really hope it helped some people out. So today's episode is kind of like a little follow up to that, right? You just turned in your applications and now what? Well, here comes the interviews. Here comes the waiting game to find out what the results are. And then ba ba da ba, the results, right? So we're just going to go ahead and talk about all of that in today's episode. Okay, so beginning with the interview process. Well, first of all, guys, just know that not every school is going to require you to do an interview. That's just a thing. As you're looking through and researching your schools, adding to that list that we talked about on the previous PT episode and making your columns, that's a column that I personally had as well. I don't think I mentioned it last episode, but that is a column that I had. If this school does require an interview, can it be virtual? Can it be in person? Like whatever. That's just something good to know. So if your school does require interviews, well, what do you do? How do you navigate that? Here's what I did. So at the time, I felt pretty comfortable with a lot of interviews. Honestly, guys, your girl had had so many jobs in high school and in college that I felt pretty good with the kind of generic answer, the generic questioning during interviews, like, tell me about yourself. What are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? Tell me about a time that worked particularly well to you. Like whatever, all those generic questions. I felt like I had already nailed those. If you don't feel like you have that in the bag, well, I definitely suggest you first look up generic interview questions and kind of figure out some, not like scripted answers, but some good answers that you feel like really reflect you. And the more that you practice those really good responses to those, you can tailor it to whatever the job or whatever the interview is, and how that will work for that particular setting. But at the time, like I said, I had applied to PT school later in life, and so I had different experiences already where interviews were required, and I just felt like I had those generic questions down already. But in terms of navigating PT school, I was like, girl, I have no idea what to expect. So I went on to good old Google and I searched what are some typical PT questions that I get, right? Or that people get in interviews. I went to YouTube, kind of watched different videos of people talking about their experiences with the interview process. And from there, I kind of also just kind of started making my own mock questions. I would, like as I was driving or maybe in the shower or just in my down moments, just kind of think about different questions and my responses. Like if they ask me this, I'll respond in this way. If they say this, and just kind of formulate different responses that I felt like would really show my character, right? One thing about an interview is that you want to be honest. Okay. So if you have weaknesses, tell them, right? So I was part of the I don't wanna, like, say I'm old because 'cause I'm not, but I was a part of the generation, or I guess in my schooling, I learned that, like, you try to turn a negative into a positive when someone asks you about a weakness, and while I do agree with that, I think also they like, they know the game, right? These interviewers, they know like, okay, they're like not everything is you're not going to be good at everything, right? Like really tell me what you are struggling with, you know? And so one thing that I was appointed myself to do in the interview was just to be honest, right? If I felt like I was going to struggle with something, if I felt like, I don't know how this is going to be, and that is a concern of mine, but here are the ways I will, overcome and I will try to achieve that goal. And, here are the methods, the plan I have in place to XYZ. So again, I think that just going through and researching different questions as much as you can will ultimately help you become more comfortable with whatever they throw at you, right? Because I don't really think that any of the questions, like not many of the questions that were mock that I saw or researched, I don't really think that I got those in my personal interviews. However, um, just going through that process of like how would I respond to this? How would I respond to that? Really helped me navigate that the interview process. Excuse me. Next, in addition to your research of mock questions for your interview, you also really want to make sure that you're researching the program, right? If you can add a little sentence or two to sprinkle in, it's not just any PT school I'm applying to. That's what it was for me. It's not just any PT school that I'm applying to, it's your specific program. If you can add that little kinda sprinkle in there in your answer to the question, oh my gosh, it'll go that much further for you, right? So, if you, look into the program and you can see their mission, or just some of the classes or, whatever it is that's really calling out to you for that school, that just shows that you have done like your duty, your due diligence in researching and showing that, I actually do care about this program. This is somewhere where I can really see myself. And I think that the person interviewing you will just have a little bit more respect for that, right? It just shows that you are going that extra mile to show that this program is particularly important to you. So again, do as much research as you can because also they might ask you questions about the curriculum, right? So that was something, I'll just kind of jump ahead, but in one of the schools that I interviewed to, their program, it was, I forget how they called it. Oh my gosh, it just slipped my head, but it was called something like problem-based learning. And it's kind of the opposite of how we learn of how traditional schools are. So typically, the teacher presents you with the information, and you study it, and then they give you a problem and then you solve it, right? This program, it was kind of the reverse of how that works. So it was they give you a problem, the teachers give you a problem. You, as the students, have to go research and find all the information for yourself and then present that back to the teacher. And then there's like a discussion about that, right? And like I said, I forget what the technical word is. I probably should have looked it up before, but I didn't. Oh well. Um, but at the time, I knew what that meant, and so I researched what that meant, and they asked me a question about that in my interview, and so had I not really done my research on the school or their curriculum, I could have really bombed that question. I'm not saying I aced it, but I'm just saying I felt more prepared to answer that question having done my research. So, there you go. So, one thing I did find as I was putting together this episode, which I personally did not know about in my time as I was applying, but oh well, it's okay. This podcast is to help you guys in the next generation of PTs So hopefully this is a help, but you can craft a compelling story using the STAR method, right? So the STAR method stands for situation, task, action, and result, to structure your interview responses, right? So in this method, I'll just kind of use an example that they pulled up, right? So here's your situation. As a volunteer at a physical therapy clinic, I encountered a patient struggling with post-surgical balance, right? That's your situation. Task. I needed to find an alternative exercise that they could comfortably perform at home. Action. I researched aquatic therapy techniques and created a personalized pool exercise program. And then result. The patient regained confidence and reported a significant improvement in their balance. So that's just like a quick little brief example. But that's a technique you can use for PT interviews and honestly, probably any job application interview, honestly. Um, the STAR technique. So let me know if you guys use that and what success you have. At the time, like I said, I did not know about this method. I feel like I probably did structure my answers pretty similarly to this, but um, it's just kind of now looking back, I'm just like, okay, I could have used this for future interviews. Maybe I'll use this. So here is the day of the interview. Okay, make sure that you are first dressing for success. So a lot of programs are like business casual. So just make sure you're looking professional, no jeans, no holes anywhere, no crop tops, all that. Dress professional like you would for most interviews. The next thing I would say is, oh man, it was nerve-wracking. Honestly, it was nerve-wracking, but um, make sure you get there early enough. You know where you're going. Okay, first of all, like plan that out a day, two ahead. Make sure you kind of know the route, know how to get there. If you're going in person. So there are, sorry, this is kind of jumbled, but I'm talking first about in-person interviews, and then I'll go to the virtual interviews because I did both. So for your in-person interview, yeah, just make sure that you are at least scoping out where the school is. If you're not scoping it out, make sure you're arriving well in advance in case any type of emergency happens, that we can get there. Like I said, you're dressing professionally. Make sure you eat, have a good breakfast. Usually the interview, if I remember correctly, in person, it was pretty much all day. So you arrive around 8 or 9 o'clock into like the main meeting hall. They give you kind of like an orientation about the program, just kind of like some general information. Like you see all the applicants, large groups. You start to go on different tours because you get split up into different groups. You go on tours of the buildings classrooms. You might meet different faculty, and then the interviews start. So you can have sometimes a group interview where it's like there are two different types of group interviews, right? There could be a panel of judges or not, sorry, a panel of interviewers with just you as the student or as the person applying. Or it can be a group of applicants and one person interviewing. So if I remember correctly, I think I was only in one setting where I had to do an interview with somebody else. I think, guys, this was so long ago, and sometimes you just kind of black things out because you just don't want to remember. But yeah, so after like I said, usually it's after the tours, or maybe in the middle of having the tours is when the interview processes will start. And just try to keep your calm, relax the nerves. You've practiced those strategies. Hopefully you've done the research. For some people, it might be helpful to do an actual mock interview with a family member, with a classmate, somebody else, just anybody that you can find, a friend. That might be helpful for you. Another helpful method might be recording your interviews to see what words you say a lot. So personally for me, as I go through and edit these videos, I know what words I say a lot, and it takes everything within me not to cringe every time I say it. Yeah, see, that was one. But if you record and watch yourself enough, you become more comfortable and you can try to have different pauses to try to avoid the words that you say too much, or you just have a better understanding of what your body language is telling, what your facial expressions are saying. So that also might be helpful for you for this time. So yeah, that was basically the in-person interview. I remember I remember being nervous. I remember, you know, I was trying not to fidget, right? I was just like, sit there, don't say too much, don't say like too much. But again, guys, I think the most important thing was just being honest. I told my faults. I was like, I don't know. I I haven't always had the best grades. I don't always have the best test scores, but here is why I really truly believe that physical therapy is for me. And obviously, I crafted my answer way better. But a line that I told most of these interviewers, I was like, basically, I just need somebody to take a chance on me. I know that I will rock this program if someone just don't even look at my undergraduate grades. Just take a chance on me, and I got you. I got you. And guys, we'll talk about PT school later, but that's exactly what I did. But anyway, yeah, I just remember being nervous during this time and all of the tours, you'll be talking to other candidates and kind of learning their stories, how many schools they applied to, have they heard back from schools yet? Because not every school gives you an interview. So some people at this time may have already found out if they were, just the result of the status with other schools. So this is a good time to talk to other candidates to kind of see, how you line up to them, and just their personal experience with all of this. It's also just nice to just be like, we're in this together. So yeah, I think that's the big thing about the interview process. I really don't have any other caveats to share. I guess the only other caveat would be just be sure in your interviews to not only talk about your success with school and academics, but also just make yourself a well-rounded person. Um, it's great that you have the grades. It is great. But what else are you doing? Because physical therapy is a science field, yes, but it's very, very much a people and human field. And so they want to know, how do you relate to others? Like, are you in any other team dynamics? What else do you have on your plate? Okay, it's great that you have a 4.0, but if that's the only thing you're doing, then okay, you should have a 4.0, maybe. But they just want to see a well-rounded person, excuse me. So make sure to just kind of bring up different things. If you have volunteer experience, if you've done experience at a clinic, you've been a rehab aide, anything that you feel like can help boost your case. Listen, now is the time to highlight all of that. Brag on yourself. They want to hear it. This is an interview. You're supposed to brag. You're supposed to brag about yourself, right? Don't be so humble, like, oh, no, brag. Don't sound like you're bragging, craft it in a way, but just be like, yeah, this is what I've done. In addition to my grades, for me, it was really important to show other things that I had done because my grades weren't the best. So like, hey, listen, this is why my grades aren't, the 4.0 that you might be looking for, because I've been doing this. I have experience here. I worked here, which gave me this life experience. And so just figure out ways to tie it all together to build your case to make you look the best that you can, in competing with these individuals. Because, like I said, PT school is competitive. They are changing some of the standards now, but it's still a really competitive field. And so you just want to make sure that you are doing everything in your power to be chosen to this program. So moving on to kind of like the waiting game. Well, in this waiting period, this is where your interviews might happen. So maybe I should started with the waiting process, but whatever. We're already in this podcast. So you've submitted your applications and now you're waiting. Well, what's happening during this process or during this time? During this time, you may be finishing your application. So I don't think I mentioned it in the last episode, the last PT episode, but when you submit an application, it doesn't necessarily have to be complete, right? What I mean by that is you may still be in some of the prerequisite classes that are required for this program, and you don't have that final grade yet. So you can't submit your final transcript. And they understand that, and that's okay. As you're uploading your transcripts, it will show that, what's in progress and what's, future, da da da. So most of these programs understand if there are still some classes that you don't have the final grade to. Some other reasons why your application may not be fully completed is because maybe you haven't taken the GRE yet, or you're trying to boost your score. So those are other reasons why your application might not be complete. So in this waiting process, these are the things that you're still doing. You're still finishing up all of your classes, making sure you're finishing up strong. You are taking the GRE. I also just saw this is kind of a caveat. I saw something the other day where a couple schools are not requiring the GRE anymore, which I'm like, I don't like that because, I'm mad because I had to take it. But anyway, I took it twice. But that's just me being a hater. I no, I think that the GRE is good to come into because it just shows that you're serious about this is a graduate program. Why would we not require the GRE, which is a graduate exam? But anyway, that's just my little thing. So some schools are not requiring the GRE anymore. Um, but also look into that school's accreditation, which I did not do. Accreditation just means that are they a certified school to teach physical therapy? So you have the Board of Physical Therapists, which is the APTA. This is just a little side note that I'm getting into. But you have the Board of Physical Therapy, which is the APTA. And they basically say, like, yep, this school is a certified school to teach. And so it's like a real school, right? Or there are some PT programs that unfortunately are not accredited, which means like you're really not like licensed. I don't really understand why you would choose that program, but whatever, because you can't really practice physical therapy after completing it. So it's kind of like a waste of money in my eyes, but whatever. So I wonder if the schools that don't require the GRE, if they're accredited or not. That's something you would have to look into as you're applying. But I just thought I would share that real quick. Anyway, back to the subject. So we're talking about the waiting process and that your application may not be complete because you might be doing finishing out your classes or completing the GRE. Let's say all that's done, right? Now you're just like waiting to hear, am I going to get an interview? Or am I going to get some results, right? This was a stressful process for me. I personally am very impatient. So I was checking my email probably like every day, multiple times a day, until finally, I probably after a few months, I probably started settling down. So most of the applications I turned in were in like November or December. You start kind of hearing back after, so I'll say weeks actually. You start hearing back kind of like in February, like January, February. Again, every program is different. I heard back earlier than some from other programs. But by the new year, they're starting to send out because they have to make a schedule, right? So during this waiting process is when you'll potentially hear that you have an interview. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. This podcast is a little bit jumbled this morning. Let me go back to the interviews. I told you guys about the in-person interview. I did not mention virtual. So you can also have a virtual interview as well. I did do this type of interview because one school was just too far away at the time. There was like a snowstorm, and I was just like, look, I'm not going to be able to make it. It's over 12 hours. Um, and I just couldn't afford a plane ticket at the time. And so they're like, hey, Zoom works. And I was like, bet. So um, honestly, not much changes with a Zoom interview from the techniques and strategies I told you guys about for preparing for it. You still need to dress nice, and I suggest dress all the way nice. Don't do like the little professional on the top, non-professional on the bottom. Because what if you have to adjust yourself? You stand up for a second and you ain't got no pants on, and now your PT instructor has seen. No, don't do that to yourself. Just go ahead and dress all the way professional. Make sure you have everything set up so you still want to be, early, making sure you have your area, nice. Try to find like, a quiet setting, something with not a lot of distraction in the background, white wall, not white, but just plain backgrounds. Um, and be present in it. It's even though it's a virtual interview, like don't be distracted, don't be on your phone, don't be like because you're on your computer looking at different notifications, like be present in that moment. Yeah, that's the only thing I want to say about that. So sorry, that was a little bit of out of order, but I guess what reminded me of talking about the Zoom interview was just, again, during the waiting process, that this is where your interviews may or may not start popping up as you wait to hear the results of what's going on. So from your interview, then they may say like, a couple weeks to maybe a couple months that you're going to hear back about. It's usually a couple weeks to like maybe a month and a half, 2 months at the max, because they're also trying to, sort out who's going to be in the upcoming class. Usually after your interview, they'll tell you when you'll hear back. Um, and another just thing, this is for all interviews, so I guess that's why I didn't say it, but it's inherent to me, but maybe not to other people. I'm sorry again, jumbled, but this is an interview for you too, right? So they're interviewing you. You should also be interviewing the program to make sure that you want to go there, that you're going to be a good fit. So I do that for every interview. I guess that's why I didn't really mention it, but I'll just go ahead just in case it's not inherent for people. Make sure you're interviewing that school. Make sure you have questions for them. One that shows interest in the position, and two, like I said, it's because you want to make sure that that's going to be a good fit for what your values align to the program that you want to be in. Sorry guys if you feel like I'm going back and forth, but honestly, the waiting process and the interviews, they kind of both are in the same period of time. So I think I'm sorry if it sounds a little bit chaotic. But as I keep talking, I'm like, oh, I remember this, I remember that. So yeah, I'll try to be a little bit more on schedule next time, but hey, what can you say? Other things you can do during this waiting process besides checking your phone every second, I don't suggest that. Try to distract yourself, try to think about other things. I was still kind of a little bit of a partier at the time. So I remember I was like, I just celebrated, turn in my application. So I just like went out a lot. But don't do that. Find something else to distract your mind. That way you're not always checking, always thinking about, am I going to hear back from the school yet? You're going to hear back. Connect to your friends, connect to your family, still be working on the prereqs and everything you have to do. Finish out the year strong, make sure your grades are strong. If you haven't taken the test yet, make sure you're taking the GRE, all that kind of stuff. And the only other thing you can do in this time is honestly pray. Like for whatever result that you get, right? So we're about to get into that segment next, but you can get one of three results. You can get accepted, you can get waitlisted, or you can get rejected. And I will go over the waitlisted part a little bit more because obviously people know accepted and rejection. But just prepare for whatever answer that you can get, right? Like I just remember saying again, like, God, if this is for me, then you'll make a way, But if it's not for me, then like I said in the last episode, c'est la vie, if it's not for me, it's not for me to get into PT school. This is not the path that I'm meant to pursue. But I had faith. I was like, whatever is meant to be will be. I just remember praying, like, I pray to at least get into two schools. I would like to have a choice. I don't want to feel like I'm forced to go to one school because that's the only school out of 11 that I got into. But I just remember, like, just at least, hopefully, God, please give me two schools. But let me just be okay with whatever answer. This is not really a reflection of me as a person. I understood that PT school was competitive and that, it is what it is. My application was mediocre. And I just knew that it was what it was. One thing I did have to prepare myself for at this time was that I had not faced rejection in terms of a professional program at this time. So a lot of I just knew I had this thing. Guy, it might sound weird. This is no flex by any means, but like what my track record was if I could land an interview, I could get the job. Like that's just how it was growing up. Like in all of my jobs, like I said, in high school and in undergrad college, if I got an interview for something, I always got that job. No matter if I really wanted that job or not, I would like sometimes accept it, sometimes I wouldn't, but I always was offered that position, even when it came to like scholarships, I didn't really apply to many scholarships, and like for undergraduate, but I would I got them. They might be Pell Grants or they might just be, for having a certain GPA in high school, but like I got them. I didn't apply to many um colleges for undergrad, but of the schools I applied to, I was accepted to them. So again, this is not a flex, but I just had to really start to kind of prepare myself like girl, you gotten into and you've been accepted, you've been blessed, but you've gotten accepted to a lot of things that you've pursued, right? This time you're not as prepared, right? The application is not looking as strong as maybe some of your other competitors. And this program is competitive, you might not be accepted to some things. Like actually you applied to 11 schools because girl, you know you're not going to be accepted to some things. So during this waiting process, that's something that I really kind of tried to like reflect on, try to think about, okay, well, what if I'm not? Like what will that do to me? Will like okay, well, I won't break, right? Because I already told myself, and I'm a person of faith, so if you're not um I'm sorry, but I am. And I just told myself, like, again, if this is not for me, it's not for me. It's not supposed to be for me. And so while I might be sad because I really want this to be for me, if it's not, then I can't really change that. And so I just, during this waiting process, I was just reflecting on that, praying on that. All right, so on to the results, right? Guys, in the last PT episode, I told y'all I would come clean about how many school, like the breakdown of the school that I applied to. Girl, what happened? What had happened? Were you accepted? Were you denied? Well, obviously I was accepted somewhere because I have my doctorate now, right? But I told you guys that I would break it down. Well, here's the breakdown. Okay. Actually, no, I'm about to go into some things and then I'll tell y'all. I'm gonna make y'all wait a little bit. Yeah, I'll make y'all wait a little bit more, a little bit longer. So I'll tell you my story. I'm waiting. I had a couple interviews. Don't ask me how many. I'm not going back to any more interview talk. But I had a couple interviews um for the schools and now I'm kind of like but before I had an interview, I had gotten my first rejection letter. I believe it was from a school that was in state. And I was like, dang, I didn't really want to go to that school. Like, it was just an okay program. I didn't really know much about it still. Like I said, I was researching as I was applying. So I was like, but I was like, dang, I ain't never been rejected. Like I said, I just told you guys my history, my track record. And being denied, I was like, oh, rejected. Oh, they said, dear Miss Hannah, last name. We regret to inform you. I said, regret what? Y'all regret to inform me of what? I was sad, you know what I mean? I don't really remember all of the emotions at that time. I wish I journaled that way I can like kind of go back and anyway, but um I remember being sad. I remember really like leaning on my mom and I was like, "Mom, they don't want me." She's like, "It's okay, baby. It's you know." Like, yeah, I might have shed a couple little tears. And if anybody's laughing at that, like it's not funny, you know, it's just real. To get your first rejection letter, that's some real stuff. So don't laugh, okay? I was invested. Also I hope people even like I said, even though my application was not the strongest, I had never faced rejection professionally. Personal life, yeah, took some L's. But anyway, we're like professionally never faced rejection. So for those of you guys who are listening, who your application is strong, you guys are the 4.0 student, valedictorian, all that, like just know that PT school is competitive and you might still face rejection. And so it doesn't matter if you're like, it doesn't matter. Like you might still face it. And so it was really not traumatic because it didn't like really impact my self-worth or esteem, but it was hurtful. It hurt at the time. That's what I'll say. And it did make me sad. And you know, like I said, I might have shed a couple tears and but I just was like, okay, pick myself up. Got it, you know, move on. All right. So we got one rejection, right? So then a couple weeks go by, check my email because I'm checking every day, multiple times a day. So I'm checking, boom, the next school. Now, this is a school that I was like, when I had applied, I was like, this would be kind of a cool school to go to. Now, this school, so I'm from like what they call, I guess it's like the middle America, you know, mid east, Midwest. Like it's like the middle America. I want to eventually share some patient stories with you guys. So I'm not gonna like exactly tell you my geolocation, but like more like on the east side, but like in the middle, right? Where we have that kind of weird accent and a lot of movies make fun of us from the state. But anyway, so um I was from that part of the world, you know, of America, of the United States. And the school that I had applied to was all the way like out west. It seemed like it was a very like a beautiful, like scenic area, you know, lots of like mountains and I'd probably still be one of like the one of 10 Black kids out there. But I was like, dang, that would be cool to live out there, right? And to kind of experience what life all the way out west is like. So I kind of had really been banking on the school. I kind of had really wanted to get accepted. But then I got that email and they were like, "Dear Miss Hannah, we regret." I said, "Dag, we regret again, two schools in a row. We regret to inform you again that your application is not accepted. Not one rejection. But two back to back, oh my gosh, guys, I was hurt because this school I actually did kind of want to go to. You know what I mean? Like I know I had cast a wide net and I was like, any school that takes me, you know, I'll go. But like there are some schools that I really could see myself going there. And that was one of the schools. And I was like, dang, I really, really, really want to go there. And they said no, you know, and so that also hurt because, like I said, it was two schools back to back. Really, that one kind of did take a little chunk out my ego. I was like, "Ooh, all right, am I gonna be accepted anywhere?" Because you know, I am a little bit dramatic. So I was like, "Oh my gosh, like what if every school says no?" And I was like, even though I told myself that I wasn't gonna be mad, that, you know, if it's not for me, it's not for me. But I wanted it to be for me, you know, because you have plans, right? And I wanted to pursue PT. I just really felt like at the time, if I didn't get in on the first round, it wasn't gonna be for me. And now I have two rejections on my belt back to back. What if it's really not for me? Like, what if every other school says no, you know? So, what I'll say about this little tidbit is guys, rejection happens in life. It's part of life. You can be the best. You can think you're the best, right? You can have all of the criteria, you can meet all the qualifications, and for whatever reason, still not be accepted. And that is just the reality of life, not just for PT school, but for life. Okay, life in general. You will face rejection. So, in dealing with rejection, deal with it how you process it, right? Give yourself that time to grieve a little bit, but then pick yourself up and move on because what's going to be meant for you is meant for you. So if it's not happening, figure out a way to process it and move on because like I said, rejection is a part of life. Don't let it impact you. Don't let it impact, like, if you have a rejection letter and then have an interview shortly after, like, don't let that rejection stop you from having the best interview for that next school. Let that rejection fuel you, right? You're like, oh, that program didn't want me. You best believe that you're gonna want me because these are my qualifications. Like just sell yourself, not in that way, but like make yourself a strong applicant. Do not let yourself be hardened by the rejections that you will get. Um, if you do have like an interview shortly after. If you don't, like I said, just give yourself that time to process, grieve if you need to, shed a little tear or two, maybe go out, have a little drink or two, and then get yourself back on track. Okay. Don't let yourself get down because there are still plenty of schools out there for you. And even though my motto at the time was if it's not for me, it's not for me, and I'm not applying again, there are tons of people in my cohort and people that I have encountered in this journey who were not accepted on the first round. They didn't apply to as many PT schools as I did. They maybe applied to 3 or 4 at the time and were not accepted by any, and they took a gap year and then applied again, right? So, and they might have had better applications than me. I don't know. I don't know why I was accepted and somewhere, I'll tell you guys where. I don't know what the rationale for why they were denied from where they were and I was accepted or why I was denied where I was. But just know that this is not the end of your story. There's still plenty out there. And so do not get down by this rejection. Okay. So now we're going to move into the waitlist process. Well, what is waitlisting? It is what it sounds like, right? To me, I guess. But if you don't understand, the waitlist process is basically where you're not rejected, but you're not flat out accepted. So they're like, here we have a list of candidates that we like above you, but you are on this list where if these candidates don't want us, then you move up on this list and then if you're close enough to the top, then hey, you're accepted, right? You're not rejected. You're just lower on our acceptance list, kind of, right? So most schools, you have to see what program as you're researching, but most schools that I ran into, the class size was about 40 students per class. You might get 25, you might get 30. I think I looked for a little bit higher of a class, 'cause that way I had a better chance of getting in. So a lot of schools I remember, or my personal cohort was 40. And a lot of schools that I've been talking to, and just kind of like I said, like remember they were around like 40-ish per class, So if the people that they accept, if they say no or they choose different programs, you move up, 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 up on that waitlist list, and then you could be one of the people who are accepted. So as you're on this wait list, um, that feeling was interesting. It's like, okay, it's like hopeful, right? You're like, oh, I'm not totally denied. So that was nice. I think that was the next thing that came. Again, the guys, this was so long ago, and I was really trying to remember. I was trying to find information. Unfortunately, I couldn't access my email address that I was using at the time. So I had to like rely on memory and my mom to figure out like what was going on at the time. Um, but I believe that the next result that I found out was that I had been waitlisted to a school. And that was like, okay, hopeful, right? Because I was like, okay, it's not another rejection letter. I can do a wait list, right? I could do a wait list. And some schools will even tell you what number you are on this wait list. So you could be, they might tell you your number like 8, right? Or if you're kind of like lower, they could be like you're, number 26 of 100 and something applicants. So they will sometimes give you, where you are on the range of wait lists. Um, I believe that for most of the wait lists that I was on, I was towards the top or like kind of towards the middle. And so that just kind of also helped me process my emotions a little bit too. Like if I was like mid on that wait list, I was like, oh girl, just go ahead and look at this as a rejection because, a lot of people would have to re to not accept that program for me to be able to move up on this wait list. And so not I didn't count that out, but I just kind of, like I said, more kind of towards a rejection, just to kind of like get my emotions aligned. So if I did get it accepted somehow, I'd be like, oh, it's like a pleasant surprise. But I just more kind of it as like, oh, this is probably not gonna work out. Um, but have hope in being on the wait list. You can still reach out to these schools. You can still be communicating with their administration office, like, hey, have I changed? Has the status changed at all? Sometimes it can change weekly. Sometimes it can change every couple of days. So I remember like kind of just making sure I would email pretty often to see if my status had changed. And it did, I would be moving up sometimes. While this was happening, I might have been hearing back from some other schools about things, but still checking into some the schools I really wanted to, like, hey, what's the process like? What's going on? And they would be really nice and like, oh yeah, you've moved up, or no, the wait list number is still about the same. So just go ahead and if you're on the wait list, feel free to still reach out to these programs. That also shows that you're still interested. You're like, hey, like I want to be in this program. Not saying that you can like jump the line with anything, but it just looks better to show that you actually, again, do care about this program and that you're trying to get in. You're earnest about seeing, if you've moved up or not. So, um, if there's also anything that you've updated in this time, you can also tell them. So, like, hey, I did finish my classes, which made my GPA higher. Or, hey, I did retake that GRE. I do have some more volunteer experience or some more observation hours that, I'm trying to add. Those are also things you can do that I don't know if they impact your application. Listen, I don't look at applications, so I can't tell you. But during this time, when you are on the waitlist process and you do improve different parts of your application, you best believe you're making sure to tell people about that because that also could impact the decision making and getting you an interview or B, higher up on the wait list. So if you're doing that during the waiting process and you find out that your wait list is somewhere, like I said, make sure that you are updating them, that they have the most current information about the strength of your application. All right. And then finally, guys, to the acceptance part. When I finally got my first acceptance letter, yeah, I cried. Yeah, I did. I did. I'll own it. I did. I was like, oh my gosh, yay. Very, very excited. I was like calling people, telling people about it. Um, praying and thankful. I was like, God, thank you so much. I just need somebody to take a chance on me, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I was very, very excited. And so that will last for a long time. And then as you read the letter, so dear Miss Hannah, we are, we are pleased to congratulate you on your acceptance to this program. And you're like, yay, da da da, da, right? And then later down below, if you keep reading, right? Because the first time I got my acceptance letter, I just read the top line. I was like, accepted, right? It took me a little bit to actually like read the rest. So when I read the rest, you come down to reality a little bit. And that's where you're like, oh, I gotta pay my deposit. Oh, to reserve my spot. Yeah. So that's what I mean about kind of moving up or on the wait list, right? People, if you don't reserve your spot when you get accepted, then your spot goes away and it's on to the next. Okay. So when you do get an acceptance letter, you typically have a couple weeks. So it's like 2 to 4 weeks usually to make your decision to say, yes, I want to secure my spot in this program. Cool. So you make that decision, but there's also a deposit fee. Most of my deposits were, I believe, $500. Again, it might be different now, but the deposit will eventually go towards your tuition. But it's really just right now, money to reserve your spot. And so when I got my first rejection letter, or sorry, and so when I got my first acceptance letter, best believe paid that $500 quick and easy, not quick and easy, but it hurt, because I was working. But um yeah, paid it because I was like, secure that spot, right? I don't know if I'm gonna get it in anywhere else. I had two rejections at the time, maybe a couple wait lists at the time. And this is my first acceptance. Of course, I'm gonna secure that spot, right? So pay the $500. Just so you know, the deposit is non-refundable. So as mentioned, if you go to that school, it will be applied to your tuition. If you do not go to that school, because even though you pay the $500 to secure your spot, you don't have to go to that school still. And so if you don't go, it's just a waste of money. It's just not a waste of money, but it's just a waste of money because it doesn't go anywhere. You don't get it back. You secured the spot for something you're not attending. So yeah, that's what happens when you are accepted. So I'll just go ahead and kind of talk about the results. That way I can kind of continue this segment. So drum roll. Out of the 11 schools, and nobody tried to play me. Nobody tried to play me because, like I said, I was very honest about my application, about not being the strongest. So yeah, okay. So I'm kind of nervous to tell y'all. But anyway, all right, we're just gonna do it. Rip it off like a band-aid. Out of the 11 schools that I had applied to, I was denied or rejected, I'll say. I had three rejection letters, and the last rejection really hurt because it was an HBCU. And at the time, I really had wanted to go to an HBCU. I had been around a lot of white people, and not that that's bad, but I just really want to be around like Black people and have like a Black education at the time. And so I really wanted to go to that school. And I remember that really hurt because I was like, man, Black people never like me. But anyway, no, I have Black friends, guys, don't get me wrong. But that's just like a little side note. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm diving into that. But it just I remember that school, my last rejection, that really hurt because I was like, dag. I really, really, really wanted to go to that school. And I remember I had been like emailing them like every 2 weeks, like, hey, anything changed? Because they didn't have a wait list and they were taking forever with their communication to talk about the status of anybody's results. So yeah, I just remember being really hurt by that. But yeah, anyway, so rejected from three schools. I was waitlisted, I believe to like two or three schools. And then I was accepted to three schools. I know it's a weird breakdown, like three, three, three. But then the other schools I just like had not heard back from. So I don't know if it was like waitlisted or rejected. But I was accepted to three schools. I just remember being like so excited because I had prayed like God, just two schools, just give me at least two schools. And so the third was like a little cherry on top of the cake. I was like, thank you, God. I appreciate that little extra. Give me the little third, right? Because the first school that I was accepted to, I quickly put down that deposit to secure my spot. Later, as I was like looking into housing, tuition, kind of getting all the things in place to attend the school, I found out that they were having a whole bunch of money issues. And I was like, Bert? I was like, girl, why'd you even apply to the school? How do you not know about this? But they were having a ton of money issues, which was going to affect my financial aid. And I was like, well, crap. They were also facing issues more recently about their accreditation. So, like I said earlier, accreditation is like, you know, after doing this program, is this program certified by the board of PTs, which is the APTA? And if it's not, you cannot practice PT. So I would have done this 3-year program to get out and still not be able to practice. Like, what? 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 So, yes, I had put down that $500 and then back to back received 2 acceptance letters. And I was like, thank you, God. That was a big confidence boost. It really helped, do your little celebration dance or whatever you do to celebrate. Um, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a little bit more, have a little bit more discernment this time, because I'm not just about to do 500 at both spots, right? I'm not about to pay $1,500 in deposits alone and only go to one school. So, really, I felt like I still had 2 options, even though that first school was secured. I didn't really I just felt weary about the program, if I'd actually make it through with a real degree or not that I can practice with. So I was again down to 2 schools. And so I was like, well, thank you God for adding the third one in because I'm still down to 2 schools. And so I just really looked at my list, what was important to me, prices, um, the program and the curriculum, where the environment was, just kind of like just really tried to narrow down between these 2 schools, really prayed on it. Um, and then eventually I chose the school that I chose. I was like, of the 2 options, because really I'm not going to count that third one, but of the 2 options, this is the one that I feel the best about. This is the one I think that will help me the most. And so, yeah, I accepted. I put down the 500 to secure my spot. That eventually it went to my tuition. And I was accepted. It was an official acceptance. From there, they start to add you to like the social media if they have it for that cohort. So you get to start to like learn who your classmates are going to be. You can start to talk to people. During this time after being accepted, I looked at the area and, start looking at housing there. I was like, I'm not living on campus. No, especially after the school that I went to. Oh my gosh, that's another story. That's another episode, guys. But you start to look for, your apartments and kind of what's going to be around that area. You like start doing your, if you got it like that and you don't need to have student loans and FAFSA, listen, props to you. But your girl had to do it. So started looking at all of that information, just everything to really prep and get myself ready for PT school. Other things I did during this time, um, again, finishing out my classes nice and strong. I did look at actually, maybe I'll save that for the next episode. I don't want to give y'all too much. This episode's kind of long already. So we'll kind of go into a little bit pre PT school and during PT school in a newer episode coming up. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and end it right now. Guys, I hope that this was helpful in hearing, the interview process and what to expect, how to prepare for it. I hope the waiting process, that's the hardest part, honestly. That was one of the hardest parts. Just I just want to know. I'm just such a curious person. I can be very impatient. So that particularly was difficult for me. And then finally, I hope that getting the results part, I hope that was helpful, guys. Just know that rejection does not define you. Um, you don't have to be like me and say that this is the only year you're going to apply. There are plenty of people who applied the year after when they didn't get accepted to any PT school. So if that's you, do not let that get you down, right? Waitlist, know that it's possible to move up. I think for one of the schools, I was very close to the top of the wait list. I don't think I ever moved up from the wait list to be accepted from somewhere, but I was very, very close to the top. And so I was like, oh, but then I ended up getting accepted to the other program. And it was gonna, I just wanted to feel like I was secure somewhere. And so once I really had my acceptance letters, I didn't look at waitlist options anymore, honestly. So there's that. And then, yeah, if you get accepted, congratulations. You should feel very, very proud of yourself. It's a huge, huge accomplishment. You've done the hard work and now you are in. So yeah, in an upcoming PT episode, we'll talk about preparing to go to school and then PT school itself. But guys, I have a special, special surprise for you next episode. So make sure you tune in, please. Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I think you guys will love it. I think it'll be fun. And I don't want to give any other details about it, so you can be in suspense. All right, guys. Like I said, go follow this page on social platforms. You can do Instagram, you can do YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. This page is BPBB Podcast, like Bent Pages, Bending Bodies Podcast. I am your hostess, Dr. Hannah P. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys. I'm out.